good, thank you. How about you?
I'm great, thanks. This is Jordan. It might be the three of us today.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi, I'm Alexi. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Alexi.
Alexi, lucky for you, Jordan is a Purple Patch insider, so this might be a one-to-one coaching session for you with all the questions you have for Purple Patch.
Well, actually, I don't have any specific question. I was just going to listen and, see what you guys have, but I don't know, questions?
Well, how long have you been with Purple Patch?
Not very long. I started in October. So.
Okay, great. And you're on the custom programming product, obviously?
Yes, I am. And so it's, I really like it. It's, I think it's a very smart program, challenging enough, but at the same time, reasonable enough that you can do it weeks in and weeks out. So I think it's pretty smart. And so far I like it. I have no idea what it's going to look like, racing, but hopefully if I do the work, it's going to get there. So
that's great. And what are you racing this year?
I'm racing St. George and Boulder. So 70.3 St. George in Utah,
yep.
And Ironman Boulder in June. So
iconic.
Have you done that race?
I've done neither.
Jordan, have you done either?
Yes, I've done Ironman, the 70.3 in St. George. I did the St. George when it was an Ironman, and I did it. I think I've done it 3 times as a 70.3.
Yeah.
It's a challenging course, but really beautiful. And so
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh, no. I think it's a beautiful venue for the swim, really pretty. Water's usually great. Can be a little cold, but nothing unusual. And then the bike is challenging because it's hilly, but like not insurmountable challenging. It's like a good challenge. And likewise, the run has hills too. So a lot of like terrain changing. So Purple Patch program will set you up well for both of those bike run courses.
What did you find the most challenging in Utah? Was it the bike or the run?
The run for me, because you come out of transition and you basically the first 3 miles go straight uphill, more gradual for the first 1.5 miles, and then you've got like quite a steep incline, and that's not my personal favorite kind of terrain. But then it flattens out, and then obviously you finish with a solid like couple of miles like downhill to finish. So at least you get the downhill to compensate.
Good. Would you think it's still a fast race, or I mean
no.
It's not. It's a slow. Is it a slog?
I think it's good if you're strong. It's not that it's far from my PR kind of race course.
Oh, okay. So just because I would like to set expectations so I don't get bummed out. Like it's gonna be that race and then a month later Ironman. And basically, yes. So thank you for the feedback. That's going to be helpful.
Definitely. It's not a PR kind of course, and I can be about 15 minutes slower on that course relative to Santa Rosa. 10 minutes, 15 minutes slower. Depends on the day, because of course, like weather, wind can play a role. And the nice thing that there is, and to be aware of from just the logistics, it's a point-to-point course.
Yes.
So racking your bike the day before, you've got to get out to the lake, and then in the morning you get coaches to the lake. So it's actually a good kind of practice race leading into an Ironman. One, because it's a bit more challenging, so you got to be strong. So having a solid race, if not fast there, should give you good confidence going into Boulder the following month.
Yeah. Well, I tried to do that 2 years ago for Santa Rosa, and actually I had a super awful race half a month before. So, and I was expecting a confidence builder, and it really wasn't. So that's why I'm trying to set up, my expectation for St. George, because my confidence builder, if it doesn't work, it's kind of a bummer. So anyway, thank you.
Well, Matt's the coach on the call, and so he may have thoughts. Is it 4 weeks between the two races? 5?
I think 4 or 5. I don't remember.
Yeah, so there's definitely in terms of where that falls in terms of the volume of training. Sorry, I should let Matt jump in and speak.
Well, I mean, it's a good point. One, I want to touch on a couple of things. Where are you based?
We're in Seattle, so right now it's snowing, and training actually is really, really adverse. So it's.
So I assume you're doing lots of work on the trainer, right?
My biking, I only I did 3.5 hours of 4-hour ride 3 weeks ago, and I said I was going to die. It was a zone 2, so I was not sweating enough, and I literally froze my hands. I was in a bubble. It was awful. So anyway, yes, it's going to be trainer until the weather gets better, because it's just not pleasant,
And
especially zone 2.
That's totally fine. I'll talk about how a lot of the strength, endurance, and low cadence work really applies to this course, and then secondly, I'll talk about setting expectations for a race going into and how you go about executing, right? Because the last thing you want to do going into a race is say, geez, I really want to go this time. And if you talk to any, any pro athlete or any, Jordan goes and races Kona, I mean, she certainly has goals, but it's always anchored around executing the best she can with the swim, bike, and run and on the day. And so that's how you want to break down a race. It's okay. How am I going to break down the swim? 3 key points. How am I going to break down the bike? 3 key points, and then the run. How are you managing the run? And that's really how you set yourself up to have a good day of racing. Because if you go into it and say, geez, I want to do this swim time, I want to do this bike time, and then I want to run this. Well, a lot can happen in the swim, and you can have a terrible swim, or it can not go as planned. And then that really bleeds into, what happens on the bike, right? And then what happens on the run. If you're expecting to hit certain paces on the run, and then that's not there for you, instead of being like, you need to shift that mindset as you go through, so when I talk to my athletes about setting up for a swim, I say, what are the 3 things you need to nail when you get into that swim? One, you want to prep yourself, right? You want to warm up and make sure you're thoroughly warmed up for a 70.3, right? So you want to get out, do some efforts, whether that's jogging, making sure you're getting in the water to get a little bit of warm up. It might be different for St. George, so you might have to modify this, right? Are you going to be able to get in and actually warm up on the swim, or are you going to have to sort of do a dynamic warm up? So you want to think those things through before race day, right? But you really do want to prime the engine for a 70.3, and then what's that race going to look like, right? So, usually it's 2 or 3 minutes of hard swimming, and then you try and settle into a rhythm as fast as you can, right? And for the majority of swimmers out there who don't come from a background of swimming, I say settle into a rhythm that's comfortable. Manage anxiety in the first 2 minutes, right? It's your first race of the season. You're going to be anxious going into the water. For me, I swam Alcatraz for the first time last year, and I come from a swim background, and I started hyperventilating 2 minutes into the swim. I had to turn over on my back, and this is something I tell my developing athletes all the time. Don't be afraid to turn over on your back. And there I am on my back in the Alcatraz swim, going, wow, this is crazy. But it's something I had to do to reset and get back to business. And then I was able to get my breathing under control and start to get into a rhythm on the swim. So key things for the swim: finding your sighting points, right? So if it's a wavy day, if there's adverse conditions, where's the sun going to be in the morning? You really want to start thinking about those elements. Okay, what am I going to be managing in the swim, right? And usually it's managing buoy to buoy, and just finding a nice rhythm and tempo and settling into that in the swim, right? And so it's always the first 2 minutes that can get really chaotic when there's a lot of people around you. And so what's your toolbox, right? Okay, I'm going to turn over on my back. I'm going to, breathe every stroke. Maybe it's every 3 strokes until I find that rhythm. And then I start to pick points along the swim course and anchor around that. Okay, I'm 5 minutes in, I'm to buoy number 2, I'm to buoy number 3, really breaking that down and going through your process of managing that swim. When you're in the swim, you're only thinking about the swim. You're not thinking about the bike. You're not thinking about the swim start or what you did wrong or what you could have done better. These races always come down. They're so long, it comes down to process, right? And so processing what's going on, moment to moment, and putting that together through a swim, so putting together your best swim within an Iron, 70.3 or an Ironman is the best way to set yourself up for a good bike, right? And then the same thing on the bike. You're not thinking about your run. You're thinking about things like fueling, but you're not allowing yourself to think about the last 10 miles of the run while you're, 40 miles into the bike. You're not thinking about your terrible swim. If you had one, you immediately get out of the water. You say, check your watch, see where you're at. Okay, great. I'm on target. Oh, that was, 5 minutes slower than I expected. Well, maybe it was a tough swim and maybe everyone was slow. And so you just immediately turn the page, right? And so it's, okay, what can I do? I can nail this transition. And so it really is about, breaking down the race into the swim, into your transitions, into the bike, and into the run, And so when you get on the bike in St. George, then it's about, okay, how do I feel coming out of that swim? How's my stomach? How's my heart rate, right? And in the first 10 miles, you're always going to have that elevated heart rate. And that's always my goal in the first 10 minutes of 70.3 is just to kind of spin the legs out, see how I feel before I start settling into a rhythm. I don't know if you use heart rate as a target or watts or effort or whatever it is, but I usually take about 10 minutes to try and find that rhythm in a 70.3. And I say, okay, how am I feeling? What are my resources? What's my energy like, right? And then I start to go to my fueling plan, and feel free to send that over to us and have us review it. But I rarely stick to something that's, static. And I say, this is what I'm doing every 10 minutes. This is how I'm fueling. My check is always, how's my stomach feeling? How many calories do I need to take in? And I'm breaking that up, right? And maybe I'm taking a sip off Gatorade as I go through the aid station, but I'm really sort of managing that bike block in 20-minute segments. Set it on your watch. Maybe it's a 5-minute lap. Maybe it's every 10-mile aid station, whatever it is. I break it and I get into that race and I say, okay, how do I feel after 10 miles? Can I sustain this effort for another 45 miles? Okay, I'm at halfway point. How do I feel I've budgeted my energy? Have I gone a little bit too strong? Do I need to back off? And sometimes even within, so I'll break it into intervals and I'll say, even within a 70.3, mile 30 to 40, sometimes I'll say, okay, I think I can ramp up the effort. And, for about 2 miles, I'll bring my heart rate and my power up a little bit and see how that feels. And I'll hang out there for a little bit, but then I'm not afraid to come back off that too. If I feel like, I don't think I can sustain this. And so the big things in the bike is you want to bring as much variance as you can over a 70.3 bike course, and that yeah, of course.
I'm sorry. I don't know. And I really appreciate all you're saying, but it's going to be my 9th half Ironman. So, and it's just, I was smiling because you're obviously a good swimmer. Like I'm a terrible swimmer. So I don't even need to sight. Like there is hundreds of people next to me, ahead of me.
You do still need to sight because they may not be going in a straight line.
You know what? That's the only thing that would be, I've been looking for like 10 or 12 years as the magic bullet. If I was sighting poorly, maybe that would explain why I'm such a terrible swimmer. Unfortunately, it is not. I'm just that shitty of a swimmer. So it's actually, it's really, it made me smile when you say, your swim, maybe you had a bad swim. I have a bad swim every time. And that's why it was funny when you said, oh, what do I need to do? For me, when Ironman or half Ironman, as soon as I'm out of the water,
that's when
I know that like I'm smiling and I'm like, okay, let's the race start. And I will finish that thing because I didn't die in that stupid water. So anyway,
well, that's good about 80% of triathletes. If you have good company there. Most of us are, cyclists and runners, and then swimmers by necessity.
No. I mean, you're swimming. I don't know you're swimming, but I'm sure your swimming is not even in my dreams.
Yes, he's like first out the water swimmer.
Yeah, so I don't know you, but asshole, I hate you for saying swimming is not my thing. You have no idea what swimming is not your thing really means, right?
Okay, so
anyway.
Let me give you some guidance there. How many times a week do you swim?
Well, and that's Mike set me up. I'm swimming twice a week because the biggest problem I have with swimming is actually swimming knocks me out more than 18 miles run. Like I'm exhausted for days after swimming because I'm so bad. So for example, I was, I've been swimming. I swim, my workouts are actually pretty long. I don't know what the purple patch, swimming normal range is, but the shortest one are 3,800, which takes forever for me. And it's between 3,800 and 5,200 twice a week. And I'm
I'm not even that much right now.
Yeah, and I would not swim that much. For you, I think you anchor around time in the pool, and so you want to think about swimming between 60 and 75 minutes. And I'll certainly give you my email after this.
Yes.
And I'll find you on the portal and talk about how to scale main sets, right? So like what you're going to want to do is, okay, here's the warm up, here's the pre-main set. And you look at the pre-main set and go, maybe I cut this entirely out and go right into the main, or do a portion of that. Or maybe I'm only doing one round of instead of 3. Or maybe you're looking at it and going, okay, this calls for 4 times, let's just call it 4 times 200s. I'm going to scale that back to 4 times 100. In the swim sessions and the bike sessions and the runs, what you always want to anchor on and understand as an athlete is what is the intention? What am I trying to accomplish in this? And so if you look at a swim where it's, 10 times 100 at threshold, the idea is you want to be doing nice, strong swimming at a sustained race pace with, moderate rest, but not full recovery and not like a, 5 to 10 seconds rest. You want enough so you can hit the next interval hard. But where for me, that set might be 10 times 300. For you, you're getting the same value as doing 10 times 100 out of that same main set. And so that's what you want to start thinking about and asking questions. What am I trying to accomplish as an athlete? What does my coach want me to do? And these are always things that I encourage my athletes I coach to ask. Do you understand the meaning behind the session and what we're trying to do here? And that's always something you should do on your own too before you go into the set, not just going, okay, this is what I need to accomplish and I've gone through and I've checked these boxes, but what am I really thinking about in this pre-main set, right? It's asking me to do purple patch drill. Well, it's 5 times 200. I really don't need to do 5 times 200 of purple patch drill. I need to do some really good technique and form swimming, and I need to do a nice extended longer warm up so I can hit the main set well. You don't want to spend any more than 15 to 20 minutes on a pre-main set, and you should think about the main set being about, a half hour to 45 minutes at most. And for you, 75 minutes in the pool is fine. And I would also encourage you on the side. I don't know what the programs are like where you're at, but if you could find a master's program once a week that you can go swim with people who are faster than you, it's something we always recommend for our athletes. USA Swimming Masters, that usually have good masters practices around the country, and usually they're full of triathletes. So you just want to find one that sort of fits your schedule. And, you'll know pretty quickly if they're asking you to do, IM and butterfly, well, it's probably not the master swim for you. But if it's longer, sort of endurance focused, and triathlon focused, then it can be a great resource for any athlete.
Okay.
And I would, and so no more 5,000 yard swims for you?
Dude, that's like physically awful, but also like I feel like I need to prepare harder than a fight against Mike Tyson for 5,000. Man, this is awful. I don't know how you guys do it. Like my daughter is a college swimmer. Every day I'm thinking, what the F? How does she do 3 hours twice a day of that shit every day? You guys are weird. Like swimming is a weird sport, guys.
So, to be fair to her, and like any good swimmer, they've been doing it since they were 5 years old. It's very rare you see someone come into this sport and develop to be a great swimmer who did not swim age group from a very young age. You look at Hamilton, any of the top, front pack swimmers are all people who come from a swimming background or have been swimming since they were, developing from, 6 and under. Yeah. Much like your daughter, I assume, started age group swimming when she was 6.
She actually started swimming when she was 3, and she joined the swim team when she was 5.
Yeah.
So. So, but I don't get it. So that's why I'm very impressed with you guys, because it is such a weird sport.
Yeah. Well,
anyway,
it's a love-hate relationship. I wouldn't say I ever enjoy going to the pool.
Alexi, right?
Yes.
Alexi.
Yes.
I learned to swim at age 28, 29.
Yes.
And my first Olympic distance swims were in the mid 30 minutes. And since I've worked with Matt, I've gotten, and my Ironman swims were like an hour 20. And I've gotten my Ironman swim down to 105 since I started working with Matt and following the programs. And it's been a couple of things. One, swimming frequently, and then swimming with others has made a huge impact on me.
Yeah, because you know what, frankly, swimming, like I'm trying this year, like I'm giving my best shot. I'm doing everything I'm told. Mike told me that the workouts, I just need to stick with it, that I'm going to blow up until I don't blow up anymore, which is true. Now I swim actually, decently for me, which is huge, but for like 2,500, 3,000, it's going up. But I wonder every time if the lifeguards are not just going to jump in the water and rescue me, at the end. It's just, so anyway, but the swimming, it's like at Ironman, it's actually embarrassing. Like, for example, I did an Ironman a few years ago. I was in the top 10. I was 20 minutes slower than the next slowest person, and she sucked ass swimming. And I was 20 minutes behind her, which is like, oh my God, why? So anyway, just thank you for your encouragement. I really appreciate it.
So something I would recommend, this is something I also talk to my athletes about, is setting the lens for next year, right? And so you've got your race season. You're going to go into St. George and Boulder and swim the best you can. You're obviously a very strong cyclist and runner. And so the same as I don't need to lean on my swim, I just swim enough to keep fitness and get some residual fitness, that bleeds into the other sports. What I would recommend for you next year is to go on a swim project and say, I'm going to swim 4 to 5 times a week, but I'm going to swim. Doesn't have to be heavy swimming, but like Jordan said, you want to focus on frequency over duration, right? You don't want to go swimming 5K and blowing up. What you want to do is be swimming, 2,000 to 3,000 yards, 3, 4, 5 times a week, right? So you're building that volume up. Instead of swimming twice a week and hitting, 3K or 4K, you're going, okay, I'm going to swim 4 times a week, but they're going to be manageable swims. And I'm going to swim an hour, and I'm going to take some off my run, because we only have so much time in our lives. Right. But you can take the whole month of, let's call it September through February of next year, and say, instead of doing that 45-minute, or that 60-minute, 90-minute long run that I like to do, I'm swimming for an hour, and then I'm going out, and right off of that swim, I'm running 45 minutes. So I'm taking some of that time that I used to put into running or cycling, and you're doing just mini bricks, right? So you're shifting the focus to allow that other area to develop, right? And you'll be amazed what happens if you swim for 6 months, swimming 4 to 5 times a week, just 2K to 3K, getting in with a group like Jordan said, swimming a lot, you will absolutely develop. But, you do reach a plateau if you're only swimming twice a week. It's hard to really progress unless you're swimming more than 3 times a week, I would say. For 3 times a week is kind of the standard. You will progress, but if you really want to lean into the swim or any of the other disciplines outside of running, because running is very corrosive, I would never say like, oh, we're gonna run 6 days a week to any of my athletes. But for swimming, you could swim 5 days a week as long as it was manageable, right? And some of those might be, it's a 1,500 recovery swim where you go and it's lots of buoy work or some fin work, and it's easy swimming, right? The point isn't to gain fitness. It's really just to, be in the water, have feel for the water, and things of that nature. Okay.
So I have a question, but also now it's just, as you said, it's going to be a personal coaching. I'm sorry, it's super self-centered. But in that case now, I have a ton of endurance, and I like training. So can I actually, for example, like I have my training plan, it's going fine. It's stressful enough that, I feel like I'm progressing, but not too stressful that I'm overreaching. So can I add swimming every day, or should I not add swimming every day?
I think you can carefully add swimming, especially what you want to be careful of is the 7 weeks leading into your 70.3 A race or your 70.3 Ironman, when you start to have higher sessions of volume. But you are absolutely fine. What I would be comfortable with is take one of our recovery swim sessions, and I'll follow up with you after this call. And here's your recovery swim, right? And I do this all the time. I have one set that I just do, every 2 weeks when I just go to the pool and I'm tired. I just do 15 times 200, 500, 5 of them are pull, 5 of them are build, 5 of them are with paddles, and some version of just a very bland, boring yardage set, where I'm just getting some easy yardage, and for you, that looks like 1,500 yards to 2K of easy swimming, adding them in, right? And it doesn't come, maybe it comes after on a recovery day, like let's just call it Monday on your program where it's a lighter day, right? And I'm going to go to the pool today and I'm just going to do 1,500 yards, very easy swim, right? You want to be careful about, you don't want to think of it as you're trying to move the fitness dial or gain swimming fitness. You want to think about it as, okay, this is a feel-based session. I'm using different toys. I'm using some fins. I'm using pull buoy, and I'm just getting in the water and moving. And you want to get out of that session. Maybe you're not going to feel refreshed because of you don't come from a swimming background, but you want to get out and not feel fatigued. And a good measure of that is it impacting your other sessions? When you go and do that key bike session on Wednesday or whatever it is for you, do you feel fatigued and tired? And this is a key part of Purple Patches. You are anchoring around those key sessions, right? And some of those sessions are really going to be the ones that, as Matt says, move the performance needle. So it's really challenging, kind of soul crushing work, but some of it's an easier, longer ride. And so you just want to make those easy days. You want to make sure you're recovering on those. When it calls for an easy run, you're actually doing an easy run. You're actually doing an easy spin. You're not staying in the gray zone, so you start to find that balance and give yourself license in those sessions to, and I do this all the time where I'll be at a Wednesday bike session. It's my key bike workout. And it's 5 rounds of, say, 5 minutes of really challenging work around FTP. I get 3 rounds into it and I just don't have it. My numbers aren't there. I shut it down immediately and I go to zone 1. And I just do easy spin for the rest of the session because I know I'm not getting the value that I need to really push the top end and get my fitness. So I shut it down, right? And this isn't a license to like quit every session, but it's having that athletic awareness to know what's the best use of my resources, right? Right. And I'm always thinking in 3-day chunks. I'm thinking, okay, what did I do 3 days prior and what's coming up, right? And so if I look ahead in my program and I know, well, Thursday's an easier swim, Friday's an easier day, and then Saturday's kind of an easy long ride. Well, on that Wednesday, then I'm going to stay on that workout, right? I'm going to stay on my intervals, even though I'm tired, because I know I've got 3 easier days coming up. Even though I have a longer ride, I know it's not going to be too taxing for me. But if I look ahead and I go, Friday, I have another key bike session, and then Saturday, I've got an endurance ride with intervals and a hard brick run. Well, I want to make sure I'm recovered for that Saturday session, right? So that's when I'll shut down and say, you know what, I'm going to live to fight another day. I'm going to get after this session on the weekend, and I'm going to dial back these intervals and go into a little bit of recovery mode. And for you, that's what's going to be important on the swim is going, what's coming up in 3 days? What do I need to be fresh for? Is there a real key session that I know that I need to be rested for? And is this going to put too much accumulation on my body where I'm not able to recover, right? Because you want to think about variation in training. So you can go very hard on the hard days, but you're going easy enough on the easy days. So then you can ask your body again to go hard when needed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I actually, when you talk about the philosophy of Purple Patch, I come back from, I raced the track, the velodrome.
Yeah.
And it's exactly the same. It's like, if you cannot do the intervals, you just shut it down because it's useless. And also you just, you have 2 or 3 days and the rest of the week you just recover to be ready to hit it the best you can. So it's exactly the same principle, but I just didn't know if Purple Patch thinks like that, but that's the track mentality. So yeah, it works very well.
Yeah, 100%. And especially for you with the swim, I'd say 100% fine to start adding in a recovery swim once a week where you just go in, and the whole point is to focus on technique, form, and easy swimming, right? You're not trying to gain fitness. You're not, you're just, getting fluid in the water. That familiarity will go a long way for you.
Okay. Hey, Jordan, how long did it take you to go from 120 to 105? How many million miles did you do in the pool, yards in the pool?
Sorry, I just hit the wrong button on my computer. I used to swim about 10K a week on average over 2 to 3 swims. And I now average more like 14 to 15, but I swim 3 times a week with people who are faster than me.
And what I'll say about,
and I put myself in uncomfortable situations too. I like follow the feet of faster people. Sorry for that.
And what Jordan does, and what any athlete does well, is, you talk about your track background or the things that make athletes great is they're consistent, right? And so it's the same thing that made you a great runner, that, applied intelligently in the swim. It's the same principle. It's just you show up and do it consistently, right? And it's really hard to do that in a discipline where, as you say, you're terrible, go to the pool, you dread it, right? And so it's trying to shift that focus from, okay, I'm a terrible swimmer, to, okay, I'm going to swim consistently over the next 4 months with no expectations around my results or improvements or anything like that. And I'm not going to think too much about, am I getting faster week to week? But then kind of set a lens, and this is where benchmarks come in, or, or whatever it is. And then you return to it in 4 months and you go, wow, I actually, you can't really see the progress within a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But when you return to it in 6 months, you go, I'm actually a much better swimmer because I swam 3 or 4 times a week. And that really, it's consistency. It's the foundation of everything we do as endurance athletes.
Yeah. And it's progress that you don't notice until you look at it back over 5 years. When I started swimming with Matt in 2013, I can look back and see how far I've come, but it doesn't feel like within a season that I've made much progress, but I clearly have.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
So one thing I did want to touch on and I think this applies to you and to athletes that train inside that aren't in California, the rest of the country during the winter years, essentially, using your trainer and thinking about terrain like St. George and how strength endurance and low cadence work, you can apply that into racing, right? Because everything we do, strength endurance is obviously sort of the purple patch secret sauce in the bike, right? And this is all the 45, 50, 55, 65 RPM, all the low end of the range that we do on the bike, right? And this does 2 things, right? It fixes pedaling efficiency, right? So at slower pedaling dynamics, you can actually think about form and drawing the foot through the back of the pedal stroke, and thinking about having tension on the chain. So it teaches you, because you're able to do it slower, you're able to focus on doing it intentionally. And then you can add speed into it, right? And then you can start to pedal more efficiently at 90 RPM or race pace RPM. The thing about, higher cadences, you don't really notice those holes in your pedal stroke, but it's easy when you're doing 65 RPM to see, oh, where am I actually losing tension on the chain? Where am I losing, the efficiency? And so that's what you really want to think about in those low cadence intervals when we're saying go 5 times 4 minutes at 60 RPM. One, that builds a lot of strength, right? So it's a built-in strength component into your cycling session, right? It makes you a stronger bike rider, which makes you faster, obviously, on the bike, but it also helps you on the run, right? If the bike takes less out of you, then you're able to deploy your resources on the run, and you're not going into it fatigued, as you would if you weren't doing this type of work. The second part of that, and this is the hard thing to coach, digitally, and without our athletes in front of us, but it's a good thing to talk about, is how do these ramping, how does end of range cadence, play out on race day, right? We're never going to ask you to ride, St. George at 65 RPMs, right? But what you want to start thinking about is, okay, when I'm coming up a hill, you want to start thinking about deploying these different cadence ranges, right? And so maybe it's when you're coming up a hill, you know, you're starting at a lower cadence, you're drawing the foot through, and as you come up over the top of this hill, you're building cadence just like we do when we ask you to ramp, when we say ramp very quickly from 65 to 95 RPM, right? What that's simulating on an outdoor course is you're coming up over a rise, you're bringing up cadence, you're bringing up power, and you're shortening the distance as you get up over this hill and start to descend or get onto a flat for where you get up to speed. So if your goal pace is, let's just say, you know, arbitrarily, let's call it 20 miles an hour, you know, the faster you can get back up to 20 miles an hour, you know, with the least amount of energy, you know, you're shortening that distance from where you're actually getting up to speed. So this is what we always talk about in the ramping cadence. When you go 65 to 95, you know, that was really what you should be thinking about on your trainer. Excuse me, is that ramping up over a hill, right? So when you can start to ride outside again, what you want to think about is, okay, I'm building cadence up over this hill, carrying my speed well, getting up to speed as fast as I can, as well as I can, and shortening that distance where you're a little bit slower, right? And so that's that effort you're thinking about when we ask you to ramp cadence, you know, on strength endurance workouts. The other piece of that is, you know, is variance, right? We ask our athletes to do a lot of variance within these workouts, right? And so we ask you to do 65 RPMs. We ask some of our athletes to do 120 RPMs, right? With good form. But what, you know, in the same way, we're not going to ask anyone to race at 120 RPMs. What we're trying to do is create enough variance in this workout. So all of a sudden, when we ask you to go race at 85 RPMs or your race pace cadence, you know, that feels more natural, right? It takes less out of you. But when you're racing a 70.3, the last thing we would ever tell our athletes, and this is, you know, St. George sort of brings the variance to you. So naturally you'll be selecting you know, through gearing, you know, a variance of cadence. You know, sometimes it'll be 70, sometimes it'll be 85, sometimes it'll be 95 to 100, I'm sure, when you're descending. But like, let's say you were doing a flatter course like Maryland or Eagleman. What you want to think about is bringing cadence variance into a workout, right? So the last thing you would want to do is go out and ride a course at 85 RPMs, right? You know, the body loves, you know, you want to think about starting to change that stress from, you know, when you're doing strength endurance, it's muscular, right? And so all the stress is on the legs. It's less cardiovascular and it's more on your muscular system, right? When you're doing high cadence work, it's the opposite. You're giving the legs a little bit of a break, and the stress is more cardiovascular. When you're doing a course, you want to start to think about, okay, where's the stress? You know, is it in my legs? You know, okay, I'm going to bring a little cadence variance, and I'm going to spin up to 95 RPMs, give my legs a little break, let my heart rate come up. Or if you're out on the course and, you know, your heart rate's elevated and you're going, geez, I just can't get my heart rate down. What you want to do naturally is go, okay, I'm going to go to 75 RPMs. I'm going to gear down, and I'm going to self-select a gear and put the stress on my legs. That will depress heart rate. And what that does is you create enough variance over the course of 56 miles that you're not just grinding, you know, at 80, 85, 90 RPMs, whatever your race pace cadence is. You know, you have that variance, you know, so you can change the stress, and then you're able to get off and run well. Because what we see is, if you go out and you just nail, I'm racing Eagleman, my race pace cadence is 90 RPMs. You get off the bike, you've ridden 95, you've hit your power exactly, and you just are flat on the run, right? And it's because your body's just been in this static state of holding this, you know, this same power and the same cadence throughout the race, right? You want to think about managing power across terrain, managing cadence across terrain, the best way to utilize cadence across terrain and power. And when those elements start to come together, then you have that variance, and all of a sudden you get off the bike, you're fresher, and you have more resources for the run.
So it's the way you describe it is it's surprising how it feels like you just describe a track racing like way of training. It's actually quite surprising, because they're completely opposite sports.
Yeah.
the Velodrome and Ironman, but it's the same principle. So yeah, it's very good. Thank you.
Yeah, and those principles, I mean, whether it's swimming, cycling, I mean, the foundation of endurance training, whether it's running, cycling, they all are apply to each other, right? And there's those few things done well, whether it's, you know, easy days are easy, hard days are hard, you know, managing terrain, whether it's on the bike or whether it's on the run, those sort of principles, you know, apply across the ranges. And if you do those things well, you know, you can bring those sorts of knowledge from track into Ironman racing. It's like, what, you know, try and bring those nuggets, you know, into the other areas of your sport and your life. And it's really kind of the magic behind, you know, not just endurance training, but like you look at how it, you know, applies to your work life, you know, family life. Like, okay, I can't just work 60 hours. I might be able to work 65 hours a week for, you know, 6 months, but at some point I'm going to break. Right. And that's the same as I could go out and run 60-mile weeks for, you know, 6 months, but at some point I'm going to get injured and then I'm going to have a setback. Right. So it's all about managing my energy, my resources, so I can be consistent across time, so I can show up for work, so I can show up for, you know, the training. Right. And this is one thing I say to, you know, in my training, I'm like, I was just talking to Rich about this, you know, one of the guys I trained with, and it's like, he'll make fun of me because I'm never the person that's like, let's do the extra interval, let's do this. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm really good at giving 80% all of the time, right? I show up, I'm consistent. I never push workouts too hard to where I'm depleted for, a week coming out of it, right? I'm really careful at managing whatever resources I have in a given week into the next day. So I can just be consistently good, right? And I think Kipchoge said something really similar when he was talking about his marathon approach. He was like, I give 85% all the time. He goes, I'm never at 100%, right? And it's just so he can, you know, consistently manage, you know, his training.
So I have a question to ask you about the actual, the way Purple Patch does setups the training phases. So currently now I'm in pre-season.
Yep.
And I'm supposed to start the race cycle training, I think in 5 or 6 weeks. I don't remember. I think it's the first week of March. Mm-hmm. So right now I think I'm training on average like 10 or 12 hours a week, like since October. And it seems like everything is really short. You know, like the longest run I've done is like 2.5 hours, like a couple of weeks in a row, and the bikes are like the longest are 3.5, 4 hours. Mm-hmm. And does it ever get longer, or is just that, you know, you do that chunk and your fitness and endurance will carry you through, for example, instead of a 4-hour bike, like a 5:40 bike on Ironman? How does that work? What's the philosophy of the team on that?
Yeah, so for most of our athletes, and this is almost true at the pro level too, and it varies by athlete to athlete, right? Like Sarah Pampiano can do a different amount of volume than, you know, some of our developing pros. But the reality is, even in a 70.3 in an Ironman, there's only a few key weeks where we ask our athletes that, hey, this is peak volume, and it looks something like, you know, maybe it's triple ride weekend where you go out and, you know, it's a training ride on Friday, and then it's either a 6-hour endurance ride on Saturday, or maybe it's 2 trainer rides on Saturday and then a follow-up Sunday ride, right? So you have these intentional blocks of work within a race build, you know, and it's anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks out, right? And so you'll see an endurance block as you go into your Ironman build, where it'll be, there's 2 in an Ironman block for us, there's 2 over distance weeks, right? One's about 4 weeks out and one's about 6 weeks out. And this can vary athlete to athlete, but what we ask them to do is, the training rhythm is mostly the same through the week, but then over the weekend, you have this huge endurance block of riding, right? What we never ask athletes to do is, okay, the next 4 weeks, you're going to go out and ride, you know, Ironman distance for, you know, Saturday, and then you're going to do it again the next Saturday, and then the following Saturday, right? What happens when you do Ironman watts like that, or go out and just ride long, you just end up stale, right? And so you have to have intentional recovery leading into that big block of work and intentional recovery coming out of that block, and that's the same on the run, where we'll say, and this will be familiar to Jordan, where it's tempo run on Saturday, where, maybe you're doing 7 times a K or something like that. And then in the evening, you have your PM endurance run, and it's 50 to 75 minutes, with some Ironman pacing work in there, right? And then on the follow-up day, you might have an easy run or an easy bike into an easy brick run. So it's intentional volume where you might run a marathon over 3 days, or, as a double run and then a run. And this is obviously athlete specific, right? Some athletes, simply can't handle that type of volume in a 3-day block. But what we rarely ask athletes to do, and never ask athletes to do, is go out and run 22 miles. What happens when you do that, and even for a great runner called, Sarah Pampiano, she'll never have a 20-mile long run, right? She will have a split run where she'll go, 7 times a K in the morning, with a warm up, it'll be 75 to 90 minutes. And then she'll have 50 to 60 minutes at Ironman pace in the evening, right? She'll get between 18 and 20 miles in that day. But between that, and she's, all she does is recover and train as an athlete. She'll do an easy spin, right? But she's recovering for that session in the evening. The reason we don't ask athletes to go out and run 22 miles, there is simply, even for Sarah Pampiano, the fatigue from a 22-mile long run is too great because it impacts training for the next 10 to 12 days, even for an athlete of her caliber, right? So we have to have that intentional rest where we break it up and say, this is why you're doing this, because we also need you to, the goal isn't to have you run 22 miles. The goal is to have you run as much as we can get you to run and get that training stimulus, but yet still be able to show up for the next week of training and have consistent training, right? And so that looks like 3 to 4 days early in that week for Sarah Pampiano, whoever, a very easy swimming, very easy biking, and then you start to ramp up into the next week again. So it's intentional big blocks of work with recovery coming out of it. So you can nail those distances and have confidence, but it's not sacrificing the next 2 weeks of training, which happens I've seen for athletes, great training, nailed all their training session, 120-mile rides, 22-mile long runs, and then you show up on race day and you're just smoked. It happened to me in my first 2 Ironmans because it's just the way I was training, right? I need to go out and do that 22-mile long run. And I had the best workouts I ever had, 5 weeks before my race. And then I was depleted when I showed up on race day because I just simply never recovered from those sessions, right? I tried to then layer more work coming out of those sessions, go right back into my training rhythm.
Yeah. I did that too for my first Ironman, and I quit Ironman for 10 years.
Yeah, I haven't done another one.
Literally, I quit for 10 years. And
Yeah.
I just went back because I sucked so bad I had to redeem myself. That's the only reason why I went back into it. Yeah, so I know. Yeah, so there is not going to be any 12-hour weekends coming up.
Well, let's see. So it would look something like this for an endurance ride where you'd go 3 hours on a Friday and then you'd try and go 6 hours on Saturday. And then Sunday would look like a 2 to 3 hour hilly endurance ride. So somewhere around 12 hours spread out over 3 days, right?
Yes.
And there's options in that program. Like if you don't have time in your life to eat, sleep, take care of your kids, work, you simply can't do that type of training, right? So it might look like a 60-minute trainer on Friday, a 4-hour endurance ride on Saturday with some intervals at race specific focus, right? And then Sunday, a 2-hour training block. That's a great block of work, right? That's over Ironman distance of riding over a span of 3 days, right? That's much better than actually going out and saying, I'm going to do a 7-mile ride. Yeah. I mean, a 7-hour ride and just get it done on Saturday. Right. And instead you want to think about intentional focus, over those short days. So you make those workouts really valuable.
Okay. Well, thank you, because I keep on wondering what it's going to be like, also for time and fatigue and work and everything. So thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.